And now for something completely machinima. Tracy Harwood. So I've done a little bit of digging around and I've discovered
Ricky Grove. Fog comes in on little cat feet.
Phil Rice. This is the best film that I've seen all year and maybe ever.
Damien Valentine. Use the machinima, Luke.
Hello and welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, podcast about machinima, virtual production, and other related technologies. I'm your host, Phil Rice, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Tracy Harwood and
Hello.
Damien Valentine.
Hello.
Ricky is off building a bridge between the twin peaks of Mount Kilimanjaro, but he'll be back in a future episode. So this is our news omnibus for the month. We're going to talk about several items of news in the machinima and surrounding community. Tracy, you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. It's been a busy month, actually. Some really notable things have happened, and I guess I want to just mention some endings. I want to also mention some pretty high-rolling accolades that have been awarded to machinima and real-time productions, and also a few AI-based things. But let's start off with Rooster Teeth. I guess the much anticipated demise of Rooster Teeth was finally announced on the 6th of March, with Warner stating that it was in discussions to sell the rights to their various series, although we're not sure exactly who with. Now, when Ben and I wrote the chapter in our Pioneers book dedicated to the impact of Rooster Teeth on all things machinima, which we published in 2021, just after the lockdown. We wrote it during lockdown, actually, although we'd been thinking about it for a long time. We knew at that point that they were in the final stretch then. There was a lot of difficult things going on in the company, and some of the key players were having some real challenges. And that was coupled with the consolidation of expertise across Warner's streaming empire, including Machinima.com and Bernie's departure. And all of that kind of, came together, and we kind of knew that the closure was probably going to be imminent. So I guess it's it's surprising, really, that it's lasted as long as it has. And in fact, that's 21 years, just over 21 years. But I don't want to dwell on the difficulties. Let's take a moment, I think, to celebrate their phenomenal achievements in machinima. Red versus Blue, despite not being to everyone's taste, including Ricky and probably me too. And of course, part of the demise of Rooster Teeth actually is basically that its audience has outgrown the content. I mean, Red versus Blue has been an astonishing success story for many years, and was considered to be an exemplar of creativity for the internet age in terms of its influence in development of things like new game mods, for Halo in particular, its episode distribution strategy, its live performances, its massive and highly engaged fan community and membership program innovations, its creative production process, which often involved community members, its development of a talent pipeline and new shows, and its events coordinated in country by chapters that were developed and grown by the community. I think really it represents a significant moment in internet history when the era of the wild, wild web hit mainstream broadcast media squarely in what I'd say was the solar plexus. It's also the longest running web series to date. It was Bernie Burns and Matt Hullum, later joined by Joel Heyman and then Jeff Ramsey and others. The humor and sheer sense of fun of what it was about was engaging to so many. I still recall the deep humor in the special episode of Red versus Blue that they brought with them to the European Machinima Festival in 2007. It was called Going Global. I'll put a link in the show notes to you if you haven't seen it. We showed it in one of the main halls on campus in Leicester with Bernie and Jason Saldana doing a panel discussion alongside. They had everyone in stitches of laughter throughout the whole program. And then I also remember later in the evening hosting an awards dinner at a local hotel. And because I hadn't fully appreciated how popular these guys were at that time, this was 2007, I hadn't planned for any security for them. So they were accosted by this massive group of fans, a good number of whom had flown in from across Europe to meet them, which meant they actually couldn't get into the hotel and then they didn't get their dinner either. And I just remember feeling extremely guilty at the time that I hadn't quite cottoned on to this as early as I should have done. Anyway, given that the often overlooked aspect of Machinima is the significance of the fan community, I think following the closure announcement, I began to wonder what actually might happen to the content. Because as we all know, Warner handled the demise of Machinima.com in such an utterly appalling way by just closing down the servers without any regard for creators and in effect managing to destroy a generation really of intangible cultural heritage that was kind of encapsulated in this vast library of work. So I asked a couple of folks in the fan community, and it turns out they are indeed organized, grabbing content and downloading as much of their favorite work as they can by by just sort of downloading it, and they're placing it in safe places through which, as I understand it, their intention eventually is to share it on whatever distribution channels they choose to pick. All on the assumption, I think, that it's going to disappear from Warner's channels at some point, irrespective of whatever the negotiations Warner are up to at the moment and with whatever content, because they're clearly not talking to the community. I'm not at all surprised this is happening. I think what did surprise me originally with Warner's behavior with Machinima.com was that there wasn't as much kickback from the community as I'd anticipated, or at least not one that you might expect from a sort of a 12 million strong fan base. I think it'd be fair to say that clearly the creators were as glad to get rid of the perpetual contracts as Warner was to wash its hands of all of that too. But evidently, this is not the case this time around. There's a generation of folks who've grown up with Rooster Teeth in particular, out of which Warner has made hay for many years. Passing it off without due respect to that community isn't something that is going to happen so easily this time around, even though, of course, Rooster Teeth's story is clearly far from squeaky. And I'm sure Damien's going to mention this as well, but there's one final thread to this story, which is that Bernie was commissioned to write a final series of Red versus Blue, which was due to air later this year. So far, I think we've not really heard what's happening. I haven't checked on that today as we prepped for the show. But I understand it is still going to stream, and it does seem, I think, to be fairly ironic in the sense that Red versus Blue actually predated Rooster Teeth by some months back in 2003. So I think it's really quite fitting that if this extra series does show, Red versus Blue will also outlive Rooster Teeth at the end too. I think that's a fun fact, really. All of that said, I think it's only right that we say thanks to them for all the laughs over the years. Machinima would not have been the same without them. It would not have got the recognition that it did without the Rooster Teeth guys. So thanks for your support and input over the years. I think if you want to find out more about the what happened with Rooster Teeth, I'm going to try and find a way to put the chapter on Rooster Teeth on our blog as a free download so that you can kind of read up on it. It's not everything that's happened, but it's a good part of the early story of how they came to be so influential in the world of Machinima. And that kind of whole part of the backstory to the development really of the internet, YouTube and what have you. So yeah, Damien, you had something you wanted to add to that, I think.
Yeah, the final season of Red versus Blue, there was a brief trailer that was released, and there's a release date. So I'm just going to read out what I've got here on my screen. It says, Red versus Blue Restoration will be available for purchase on Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, Google Play, Vudu, and other platforms starting May the 7th.
Oh.
and it will be available for digital rental from May the 21st. So obviously you can't watch this for free. You have to
Mm.
um, pay for it on one of those services, which that surprised me actually because when it got started, it's just free on the machinima.com, and it predated YouTube really, so I can't say it
It
was
did.
available on YouTube straight away. So um, yeah, so that's going to be the final season. It's still going to be released then. They released a video talking about um, despite the closure, this is still going to be their final project that gets put out there.
Mm.
Um, I'm kind of sad that they're disappearing as well. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of their work, but I can appreciate the influence that they had on the machinima community. And even though, like I said, I wasn't the biggest fan, they inspired me to get started as well because they were my introduction to Machinima. I watched the first season of Red versus Blue as it was in production. I think there were 7 episodes available when I watched it. I can't remember. It was such a long time ago, and I thought that's a really interesting way to tell a story, and very different from the kind of stories I was interested in telling. But just the concept of using a video game to tell a story got my mind going because I had all these ideas, but there's no way that I could do them live action because I was a student. I couldn't afford any of this. I couldn't afford a camera, and I didn't really know anyone that would want to be in front of the camera. But I knew people who liked doing voices and stuff like that over the internet, living all around the world. And obviously, I couldn't bring them all into one location either. But doing something like this, and um, so yeah, Red versus Blue got me started with Machinima, and so I can appreciate the influence they had on myself and other filmmakers. And so yeah, it's sad to see them go. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Ran its time, I think.
yeah.
Phil, do you you were on the ground when they were first about. So what would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean the look, the influence they had was um, undeniable. I I really really enjoyed the very first episode. I feel like uh, that opening conversation of the first episode, in fact, between the two guys, was probably the best written thing that they've done.
Mm.
And that's not to poo-poo the rest, but I'm just saying that was a real peak. And it was a clever way of using digital puppeteering basically to tell a story. It got around a lot of the things that got in the way of telling machinima stories in other engines. It was at a time when, for the years prior to that, it was not uncommon for there to be a character's face on the screen and they're talking and there's no motion here whatsoever because the game didn't even support the possibility of it. And so helmeted characters were the ultimate cheat for that. You didn't have to worry about that. You didn't have to worry about facial expression. Everything, all the emoting was done with the body and the tone of voice. And they had very, very good voice cast for a comedy show. It wasn't just well written. The sense of comedic timing that they had, even as the seasons went on, and it became a little bit more slapstick type of humor, pratfalls and catchphrases and innuendo. Um, I don't know. It felt like when that became the mainstay, and that's what's getting printed on the T-shirts, and I mean the whole name Rooster Teeth is really just a rephrasing of a very filthy innuendo, if you think about it,
Yes.
right? So that was always at the root of their humor. But when that became most of the emphasis, I found myself honestly longing for the even shallow philosophical conversation of that very first episode. That's what I mean by for me, it was a peak that I liked to see. That was my favorite thing about the writing that was done in the Ill Clan's work with Paul Marino and Frank Delario in Apartment Hunting with the Lenny and Larry series, right? Mm. When they would veer off and have a conversation, there's Apartment Hunting made in 1997, and these two lumberjacks are taking a tour of a house that they're looking to buy, and they start talking about Michael Dukakis, who ran for president on the Democratic ticket in 1988, theorizing about why he lost. Stuff like that, where it's like these bits of real and absurdly kind of funny, strange conversations. When I first saw Red versus Blue, I thought, here's somebody else who has learned to do that. It's not, you wouldn't expect a red and a blue soldier, stationed somewhere, wherever, to have a real "why are we here" conversation, but they did. And as the series went on, I think that it's not just that more of their base sense of humor came out, but also it's what the fans really responded to. That was what gamer humor is a little bit dirty, a little bit, in-jokey type of thing. So that's when the appeal kind of lost its luster for me, but that's just because of my specific taste. The only time I've ever been in the same physical space as the guys from Red versus Blue, Bernie and probably Jason was with him at the 2006 Machinima Festival in New York. Mm-hmm. That's where you and I first met, Tracy, I believe. And I wanted to talk to Bernie, but I was too shy to approach him, and he didn't give a crap. I didn't have any idea who I was or care. So yeah, that was the only time that I've ever been in the same area as them, and I kind of got, even though I'm not a fold up like a noodle when a celebrity is around, but I kind of got this sense of, I don't really know how to approach him. I don't want to sound like, stupid. I don't want him to think I'm a fanboy, because I'm not. I see him as a peer. But then how do you start that? And by the time I worked my way through talking myself out of doing that, the opportunity was gone. So I never got to meet him, but I've always heard that that they were nice people, or at least they were capable of being nice people. So I was happy to see their success. I maybe didn't celebrate it as loudly as others might, but that's because I have never played Halo. I will never play Halo. I'm not interested in that. And I think a lot of the legacy of Halo Machinima that followed maybe wasn't great. Is that tactful enough to say? I don't blame them for it, but Red versus Blue was funny. And in a perfect world, it would be the only Halo Machinima that had ever been made, maybe. That's a little harsh, I guess, but there were so many clones of attempting to recapture what they did, and then there were others who says, well, let's use Halo and go in a completely different direction. I even made a Halo film at one point, working with someone, but it was a one-off short to illustrate some of the copyright stuff that Microsoft was doing at the time. But it was about being silly, So anyway, I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I certainly, don't wish them anything but good things, and I am happy for them that they had the success that they did. Anybody who spends time in this machinima world and is able to actually, earn a living at it, dude, that's awesome. That's the very, very, very few who ever get to do that.
Yeah.
So that's great,
Yeah.
And, my particular taste about this or that, or the humor or the visuals or whatever, isn't all that important. They did it in a way that I feel like wasn't exploiting other people. at least when they got started. I don't know much about the inner workings of the company once it got big. Humans are generally, not at their best in big company scenarios. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with this. So I don't know. I'm not sad. I feel like 21 years is a damn good run. And I hope they enjoyed themselves. I hope there's not anybody that's a part of Red versus Blue that is now left with a sense of, what am I going to do with my life? I mean, dude, you had 21 years to figure that out. I hope you pivot and move on to something else. Great, So, yeah,
It's
that's
really,
where
it
I'm at
is.
with it.
Thank you, thanks, sir. I think it's really interesting because here's a question for you. The Restoration series made with Halo characters has actually been filmed in Unreal Engine. Did you know that?
Hmm.
Does that make
No, but
it?
it makes sense.
Well, yes, but is it still Halo?
Well, no. But I mean, we reviewed a Minecraft film several months ago that wasn't made in Minecraft at all. It was all Blender, right? So
Yeah,
it's the Halo aesthetic, and that's what's associated with Red versus Blue.
cool.
I think the only downside to them using Unreal Engine will be that they'll realize how much more they could have done with Red versus Blue all along. You know what I'm
Probably.
saying? The puppeteering thing is pretty limiting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I think they'll be able to make it look really good that way, and maybe introduce some new tricks because of the new animation freedom that they'll have, and hopefully they approach it with some creative verve, and they give a few surprises to the fans, some pleasant surprises. Maybe a Halo character, maybe one of the characters takes their helmet off for the first time, and we actually
That's
see a
controversial
face.
because they did.
Yeah, I know,
The TV
right?
show.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
yeah, it could be. There's
Well,
all kinds of interesting possibilities there. So,
I think it was filmed and edited before this announcement took place. So I guess it was always a done deal that this series was going to happen. I guess
okay.
really what I think the bit really that surprises me is it should really go out to the community.
Well, that's the thing
It's
is if it has already been produced, then it was probably produced with company resources.
yeah,
And there is no such thing as a giveaway with a company like Warner Brothers or anyone like that. So they got to try and make their buck. They're not going to break even on it. And not nearly as many people that should see it will get to see it until it gets pirated.
yeah,
That's unfortunate. It is.
Yeah.
But there's probably not any scenario where the company would get shut down in this manner, and then the remaining Red versus Blue people would be permitted to create something else with that IP. I mean, that IP is now, it's going to die. Like, there is no more, you can't make any more with it. I'm sure that that's part of the contract. They're not getting sent home with the ability to continue making Red versus Blue. I mean, that would shock me if that's the case.
Well, there's some very strange things going on at Warner, I think.
Yeah.
But
It'd
I've
be
no idea.
neat. It'd be a really exceptional situation if they were, but most of the time, it's the way machinima.com ended. It's just maybe not quite so
Yeah,
burn the house down for insurance money kind of feel that closing was like, that just all of a sudden one of the most popular YouTube channels in the world just nukes itself. What in the world? Who benefits from that?
yeah.
Why?
Well,
Why?
Warner recently they made a Batgirl movie. All finished, all the effects work's done. They had Michael Keaton reprising his role as Batman, so lots of people are
Uh-huh.
really excited for it. And they decided not to release it because they could write it off as a tax break, and it will never ever be released in any format because if they do, they'll then have to pay the tax on it, and they'll lose the money. And it turns out by not releasing that movie, they've made more money than any of the DC Comics movies that did actually get cinema releases in the last few years.
Hmm.
So
Well, they're not
uh,
really a media company then, are they?
No.
no, but so I would say to Red versus Blue fans, be very grateful that this is actually happening because they could have very easily done exactly the same thing and just not released this final season. So
Oh, well, yeah, I
Yeah,
have
in
no
that
doubt.
context, it's kind of remarkable that they are releasing it at all. Because, like I
yeah,
said, it's unlikely that they will recoup what they spent making it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Just because companies like that, they don't have any sense of how to make something on a low budget. To them, low budget is is high hundreds of thousands or low millions. They don't get it. So a guy like Epic Spaceman comes along and makes something that looks like $1 million budget and it's just a dude in his garage.
yeah.
They don't have any concept for that. If they would just learn that, they could weather some of these storms that they have, or having these impossibly large budget movies that if they don't perform a certain way globally, they lose money on them. It just and then yeah, stuff like this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wasn't really in camping out for tickets to see a Batgirl movie, but that's just such a waste.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's such a waste, you know?
But this is where, in my view, the hidden thing that all these companies seem to totally misunderstand and misjudge is the role of community. They
Yeah.
can, they railroad over the community, and yet community here is absolutely everything. And what are they? They're just a broadcaster, basically, narrowcaster, whatever you want to call it. They are
They're
nothing
a
without.
realtor.
Yeah,
What they are,
basically.
they're a real estate broker. They just deal with digital real estate properties.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
films. The films are just monopoly cards being traded. Yeah, it is. It's
Anyway,
sad and it's a little bit disgusting.
Hmm.
yes, indeed it is. Anyway, so I wanted to spend some time talking about that. Thank you. I've got another ending for you, which yeah, this one is another long-running series. This time it's Draxter Dupre's Second Life series, which was supported by Linden Labs, called the Drax Files World Makers, which you may well have seen some of the episodes. I've been following some of the episodes for years now. It formally came to a close on the 16th of March, although Drax is apparently quite keen to continue as an independent reporter, and in fact, he's going to try and launch a new series in August this year. Now, Drax first got into Second Life in 2007 because he wanted to document the space where people were creating new and exciting things and otherwise basically just running amok. And he has a background in radio reportage, actually. So he took on a reporter persona and produced sometimes up to 3 episodes a week of what he calls advocacy journalism. Um, and after a few different projects, he started the Drax Files in around 2013 when he met Ebby Altberg, who joined Linden as CEO in 2014. And the following year, Second Life officially sponsored the Drax Files. Um, so this is 10 years worth of reports formally representing Linden Labs. These are official videos that he's made. There's well over 100 videos per year, I believe. And I can imagine uh, he's done like a showcase video of them. I can imagine that this showcase, I can't think how difficult it was for him to pick the ones that he did in this sort of showcase. And yeah, I mean, I think he's done an absolutely sterling job of presenting this, this huge body of creative practice and people that are in Second Life doing different things, everything from kind of performance to lifetime projects to health-based projects to education kind of projects. He's kind of documented them all. He's been the kind of original documentary maker, if you like, in Second Life. So I think it's worth sort of saying saying to Drax, well done, great body of work there. Um, have to say, he wasn't the first that did this. I don't know if you remember, but Phil, probably you do as well. Remember this from years ago. Um, there was a group of folks called the Ill Clan, uh, which he mentions in his review
Hmm.
briefly. But these guys were some of the very first to do this kind of documentary style approach in Second Life. They produced something called the Grid Report, I think it was called, back in the earliest sort of days. Um, and super ironically, those same guys you just talked about apartment hunting and whatnot, those were the same guys involved in the making of those films, apartment hunting, back in '98. So that was Paul Marino, Frank Delario, Matt Domignani, Manu Smith, Paul Giannicola, and others. But
Carrier Seabrook, I think.
Carrier, absolutely. Carrier came
Yeah,
to it a little bit later, I think.
right.
But all of those guys um, were some of the very early folks that Drax shows some footage to in this summary video that I'll show
Hmm.
a link to. So yeah, so well done, Drax. Great work, fantastic body of work. Toast to you and all that. I'll put some links up and look forward to seeing um, what you do next. I think it's exciting times in that sense.
Has Drax given any indication of what's next?
I think he
Did
wants to
you already
carry
say
on.
that, and I missed
Well,
it?
no, I
Or
think he wants to carry on doing similar sort of stuff, but as an independent and not so many. I think he just wants to slow down because,
okay.
anybody that produces 100 of these films or, the amount of work that went into producing those, it's just astonishing. If you've ever seen, yeah, have you ever seen the series that I'm talking
I'm
about?
sure that I have. I can't recollect it right now, but I'm sure that I have.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. I mean, he was, I'd say he flew over to different countries where people were and filmed them. No, he didn't do that. He got them to film themselves in country. So he did an astonishing job of editing together the footage of people in their own environments with the stuff that they did in Second Life.
Wow.
And, the 3 or 4 episodes of this, so over a period of a few weeks. I mean, absolutely outstanding work. Um, I did a conference using some of Drax's work, basically trying to illustrate what living in virtual environments actually meant. And I did this at a kind of a conference, about 2017, I think it was. And people just were like, "What are you showing us? What is this that's
Mm.
going on?" But what he was doing was documenting how people are living in these virtual environments. I think it was kind of, it was very much what people are talking about today with, immersive experiences and, immersive technologies and what have you. But he's been doing this for years and showing how
Right.
people are doing it for years. And Second Life has always been at the forefront of that as an open world environment, not a game. They're all kind of tell you that it's not a game. It's a Second Life. So yeah, interesting stuff. Um, okay, so that's my 2 bits of sad news. I think I've got some fabulous news now that I'd like to share with you. These are awards of note, just reflecting on how far Machinima has actually come, because some of the early live performances made with those game characters were made by the likes of the Ill Clan in the early 2000s, but they were using things like Quake and what have you. And actually, what's super fun to have seen this year is Sam Crane, whose performance of Hamlet in GTA 5 has been gaining even more attention than it did last year. I remember last year we talked about it having won a stage award for innovation and various other kinds of accolades. This year, what they did was they took it to South by Southwest in March, and it was awarded a jury prize for Best Documentary Feature. Actually, I don't think it was the performance itself, but a documentary about the performance that Sam and his colleagues made in GTA 5. And as it turns out, they've now got a distribution deal, which I think is an absolutely outstanding achievement. Many congratulations to them. I mean, it's taken a long time for Machinima to get back up to that kind of level that we saw in those early days with the likes of Rooster Teeth being invited onto various stages globally, and people like Paul Marino and Hugh Hancock doing live performances way back in the early 2000s. I think it's even more significant for real-time production techniques, though, that particularly with use of Unreal Engine 5, um, because a company called Electro League and another little company called Weta made a film called War is Over, which is a film that was inspired by the music of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, which, as you will probably be aware, won the Oscar for Best Animated Short. It's the first time that an Unreal Engine 5 film has been used entirely as the creative platform. I think it's an astonishing achievement, actually. It's come a really, really long way because, of course, its origins were in Unreal Tournament 2003, which actually was released in 2002, but hey. The matinee tool that it is based on was, in fact, written by a guy called James Golding, who still works at Epic today. He's now its technical director. At the time, when it was released, matinee that is, it wasn't such a great success. And basically, to try and drum up a bit of interest in it when it was released, Epic launched a little contest called Make Something Unreal, which is in fact still running today. And I guess that's pretty much stuff of legend in some ways. I think you could probably say its forerunner has a pretty sterling history as well, because in 1999, Unreal Tournament was the first Unreal Engine that included a tool developed by Internet Team Reactor 4. And that tool set was called Real Time Movie Studio. So it was quite different to Matinee. And a version of that was used by Industrial Light and Magic to visualize storyboards for Spielberg's 2001 film, AI, Artificial Intelligence, which was nominated for a Best Visual Effects Oscar in 2002, but actually lost out to Lord of the Rings, which was also using machinima techniques to create those large battle scenes, if you remember. Oh, albeit what they were using was a bespoke engine, which was made by Massive for Weta. Massive still exists as a tool today. It's used in Maya. It's currently in version 9.1. So it's only taken, 25 years to get from visualization to production tool to becoming the primary creative platform, producing internationally outstanding quality work and an Oscar for the filmmakers. I think that's an absolute.
Lord of the Rings, if I remember right, that it was used in that for the generation of some of those really large scale battle scenes. They were actually kind of, I don't know if they used this term back then, but basically procedurally generated armies.
Yes.
Yeah.
The big shots from above where you can just see
right. Yeah,
that's right.
The assault on Isengard. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that was what Massive was. It wasn't Unreal Engine. It was Massive. This tool called Massive.
Right.
That's a slightly, and it was what they made for doing that, because we all thought they were using something like Unreal to do it, but apparently not. It was something else. Anyway, I think the connections here are all, kind of stacking up. The fact that we've got this kind of long history of 25 years to come to this kind of point of fantastic, an Oscar, amazing. I'm sure Epic have got lots more milestones to deliver for us as well. I can't wait to see what they do. I think they've been one of the most interesting companies to follow over the years, I think. So yeah. I've got some AI news as well. Do you want me to share that? Or are you sick of hearing my voice? Okay, AI news then. All right. I'm just going to flag these because I think there's lots going on, but not so much perhaps relevant for real-time creators. So I'll just reel them off and then see what you think in terms of whether they're relevant or not. First off, this is quite relevant. YouTube, as you're probably aware, has updated its terms and conditions this month. We're at the end of March here. So just this month, it was updating its T's and C's, which state that any realistic looking video that has been made with AI must be declared. Well, I was thinking about that. That's what, 99% of the content these days, I think. It's really about viewers, though, being able to mistake genuine footage of a person, event, or location or something that's fake. And then I was thinking about that too, and I was going, yeah, that's still about 99% of the content, though, isn't it? Um, it relates to creators utilizing synthetic versions of real voices to narrate videos or substituting faces in footage, alterations to footage of actual events or places, such as modifying cityscapes or simulating fires. Yeah. But if generative AI has been used for script generation, it says, generating video ideas or automating generating captions for content deemed clearly unrealistic, or if alterations are deemed inconsequential, such as color adjustments or basic special effects like background blurring, applying lighting filters, beauty filters, or other kind of enhancements, then content labels won't be needed. I was thinking, well, that's clear then, isn't it? Because, on
Yeah,
the one hand, it's pretty much everything, and then, oh, okay, it's maybe not whatever. I don't know.
yeah. I
I'm
was
about
thinking, I was thinking around the YouTube settings on my channel, and oh yeah, I was uploading a test video to send to show someone privately, and that option came up of about it has to be declared if it uses AI, and thankfully I wasn't, so I didn't really have to look into it, but it's already there, and it'd be interesting to see how many people who create AI related content actually bother to declare their videos that way.
yeah. Well, I
And
was
also,
Well,
thinking,
they've dug themselves a little bit of a hole there, haven't they? I mean,
I'll say,
it's easy to correct, but I mean, first of all, their emphasis on use of the word realistic.
yeah,
Realistic is not an objective thing at all. So who's to say, someone could say, well, arguably, Lord of the Rings type CGI is realistic. Well, but no, it's not. If what you mean by realistic is, does it look like something that could really happen? And you apply your brain and you go, there are no such thing as cave trolls. So no, it's really strange. But the thing is that when you post a video, the form or the affirmation that you have to give, it's much simpler and frankly much less ambiguous than the expounded versions that are being discussed on Twitter and on blogs and in the news and wherever else it's being discussed. It's like it's really being blown way up to make it sound like almost anything could fall into that AI content category. But when you actually go to post a video, the name of the header, the section is called altered content. And it asks you, this is a yes or no question. Do any of the following describe your content? One, makes a real person appear to say or do something they didn't say or do. Okay, so what's a real person?
yeah,
Obviously, there's the obvious answers where, the Prime Minister of Great Britain or Donald Trump, those are real people.
uh-huh.
And so if you make a video of, Angela Merkel and the
Angela, yeah.
once and maybe former head of Germany say something that she didn't say, obviously that's a no-no. But what is a real person? I mean, if I create a really realistic looking character in Character Creator 4 or with
Metahumans.
MetaHuman,
Mm.
and it's just a made-up character, maybe it's based on a real photograph of a face, but it's not a real person.
Mm.
what about
And it doesn't look like any recognizable person. Like maybe I make it using photos of my uncle who's never been online and nobody knows. So is that a real person? And why would it matter if I make somebody that no one can recognize say something they didn't say if I don't tell them, hey, this really is my uncle saying that he thinks all children should have such and such tattooed on their forehead. a UPC symbol so they could be scanned. My uncle didn't really, you know what I'm saying? So real person just doesn't help there.
What
No.
about if let's say I'm going to use the Empire as example here. Obviously, I've got character model of Han Solo, fictional character played by Harrison Ford, who's obviously a real person, and I've made the character model look like Harrison Ford. But he does obviously Harrison Ford does not lend his voice to Edge of the Empire for pretty obvious reasons. Um, I've got a guy that's named Matt Finish he does a really good
He does
Harrison
a
Ford
really
impression.
good job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so obviously he's saying the things that Harrison Ford never would have said, but it's also not actually Harrison Ford. It's a character that Harrison
Character.
Ford played.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets
Well,
really
there's a lot of elements
muddled.
there. I mean, the truth is, no matter how good your Harrison Ford model is, it's not going to look exactly like, under scrutiny, exactly like Harrison Ford.
That's true.
It's going to resemble a lot, but it's not going to look exact. Like, it would be not hard for somebody to realize that's not really Harrison Ford.
That's true.
So yeah, there's that. The second item under do any of the following describe your content is alters footage of a real event or place. So any AI generated footage of something, that doesn't fall under that. Like, there's no reasonable interpretation that some CGI generated landscape is a real event or place unless you conflate that with the thing above, which is, let's say I rendered a really, really realistic render of Big Ben.
Yeah.
Okay, so then maybe, even though technically I'm not altering footage of a real event or place, I'm creating a 3D rendering, and that's not prohibited. So there's a lot of gaps in this that don't make a whole lot of sense.
It's
Secondly,
as gray as anything.
this may fill in the Big Ben scenario. Number 3 is generates a realistic looking scene that didn't actually occur. So that's not enough to just be a photo of Big Ben. It has to be a photo of Big Ben with Harrison Ford climbing it in a Spider-Man costume or something. Like, that didn't actually happen. Those events didn't happen. So using a
maybe Phil, Robert Powell climbing up and hanging on the clock face.
Right. Or doing a Charlie Chaplin thing where he's hanging on to one of the hands of the clock face and kind of writing it down and dropping his shoe. And but anyway, so none of those things really apply. Let's think about, and that's what you're presented with is yes or no. That's it. Underneath the footnote, just to finish here, and then we'll talk a little more about it. To follow YouTube's policy, you're required to tell us if your content is altered or synthetic and seems real. This includes realistic sounds or visuals made with AI or other tools. Selecting yes adds a label to your content. So it's really poorly worded because, like, it doesn't mean that any use of realistic sounds qualifies. It's that it has to be altered or synthetic and seem real, and then you use realistic sounds or visuals made with AI. So there's like all that there's actually not that many things that fall into that category.
Or other tools. It's everything.
Huh?
It's everything. Or other tools. You could read that to mean everything.
But it has to be altered or synthetic and look real. And since real is not objective.
Exactly.
How do I know if something's... The only thing that somebody could say with certainty is that this or that seems real to me.
Yeah.
I might hope it seems real to everybody else, but I don't know. So it's they've got to figure out, and they will. That's the way these things work, is the holes will get punched in this, and then they'll tighten up the wording or whatever. And that's where the rubber really meets the road, like what this is actually going to be. Right now, nothing that I have ever made, even though I've used AI stuff in comedy films, whatever, but nothing even remotely is something that I would have to click yes on. Nothing.
Really?
Nothing. No.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm as clear as mud on it because I was looking at it and
Yeah.
thinking,
Now,
I
mind
don't-
you, only like 3 or 4 things or a handful of things that I've made actually have it, but like it's not as broad as one might think. I kind of feel like that the people whose propensity is to fear over regulation by corporations or government have everything they need to interpret this in the worst possible dystopian tyrannical way.
for sure.
And the people who are like, come on, and just are more laid back, have everything they need to interpret this in the most lackadaisical, laissez-faire, way. That's the problem. It's not that it is either of those extremes. It's the fact that it's not using words that are, not all the words in it are easily definable. And I'm sorry, real person needs to be better defined.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And seems real or realistic, that just needs to be better defined. Because somebody could apply a certain shader to Minecraft and make it look more realistic. Somebody could apply certain shaders to GTA 5 and it looks realistic, but it's not a real freaking place. So is it ever really realistic just because it looks like a real automobile on a real street, but it's made up? So all those things, these words the way they've structured this, there's no pinning any of that down. So this is going to get
Hammered.
I don't know. I think the only people who are going to feel compelled to use this are people who are using AI content and are proud of it. Like they want people to know, yep, that's what I am. I'm an AI artist. So I'm going to say yes. So it gives this label to my content. That's the only thing that this is beneficial for. Anybody that doesn't want to, unless you're out there trying to, you know what the only thing is that definitely qualifies for this as a compelled yes is if you're deliberately trying to make deep fakes
Of course.
of real people, real celebrities, real politicians. That's what they're trying to guard against here. I mean, this could be so subversive. Not this, but the actual deepfake technology.
Well, I have no
To be
doubt
able for
that-
anybody to be able to just put out a video showing the leader of a nation, showing Vladimir Putin saying he's declaring nuclear war.
Yeah. I have no doubt that's-
Have you guys watched any of the aftermath of the Francis Scott Key bridge collapse here in the U.S.?
No.
I've seen bits of the
enormous
news, but-
enormous bridge
Yeah.
in
I saw it
Baltimore,
happen, yeah.
and one of those super tankers
Yeah.
crashed into it, and the entire bridge collapsed.
Yeah.
And so somebody posted a video of the event on Twitter. You read that Twitter comment feed, and I'm telling you, it's hard to come away from that not feeling like, oh my God, we're done. We're done as a society. Like the things that people are thinking and saying about that, the conspiracies that are just floating out there. It was deliberate. It was Biden. It was Trump. It was racism. This has something to do with the Supreme Court decision on abortion. This is, I mean, it's just crazy stuff. Crazy. And that's with a real video of a real event. There are explosions on the bridge. It's a fix just like 9/11. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't get it. Now, imagine if somebody can create a realistic video of one of the world leaders that's in a tough spot right now, like Putin or, what's the guy's name in Ukraine? The leader there, I can't remember.
Zelensky.
Or Netanyahu, or Joe Biden, or Donald Trump, or Macron, or the president of Argentina, or wherever. And you can just make a video that is very realistic and believable and have them saying something very inflammatory, declaring war or just saying something that's just not true. That's what they're trying to stop here. But are the people making that going to follow this?
Also not. I mean, that's the point,
Yeah,
really.
that's
Exactly
the
why
thing is
I highlighted this.
you just don't do it and you put it out there and let it go viral. And it's okay. So YouTube eventually is going to catch it and take it down. But you've already done what you set out to do. You've already got millions of eyes on it. You've already given people the ability to download their own copies of it and reproduce the very same tech that people are using to save Red versus Blue right now. You can do that with any YouTube video. You just download it and then republish it somewhere. So there's no stopping that. That's a real scary thing. So this just wastes the time of creators like me, like Damien, like everybody else making stuff going, well, gee, now, is my stuff realistic looking or not? I used a sound effect of a Wookiee farting. So does that make this more real? And oh, that lightsaber looks really real. That's what it does.
Yeah, of course.
So,
and
it needs work.
All I could conclude from this is that, I mean, we're going to be seeing just a lot more labels, because what's going to happen to the content that isn't labeled, that that somebody then says, oh, there's AI used in this. That stuff's going to get taken down automatically. So what you're going to get here is everything, pretty much, the 99% of content that's on YouTube being labeled in this way, because at some level, everything is using AI. And what are they really then trying to do with this?
Yeah. And I think before they get that sorted out, the AI tools are integrating it to everything now. Microsoft themselves has it in the search engine, in Microsoft Office. Google has it in Google Docs. Canva has it as part of Canva, the most popular, online imaging data. It's got AI all throughout it. Yeah. I think by the time that they catch up with how to label this stuff, it's going to be so pervasive.
Yes.
That there won't be. You're right. If the state of things right now isn't already what you're describing, Tracy, which is that it's all in there, it will be tomorrow. Basically, it's like right around the corner.
By the time this video is released, it will have
probably, yeah.
We had that before. I think I made a joke about it won't be long before someone creates an AI video generator. This is back when we were first discussing AI image creators.
I remember that discussion. That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I think it's last year or something like that. And sometime between recording and the episode going out,
that's when Runway first came out. That's right. Yeah. That is exactly how it happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't get it. And the only part of me the main part of me that's annoyed with this is how much of this is them really trying to protect against the kind of content that I described, where there's a bad actor trying to use it to fool the public and cause unrest and make political messes happen, right? How much of it's that, and how much of this is just catering to the section of artists who are just AI, they're just pissed because it's easy for someone to do something that used to take longer.
Yeah.
Because that opinion, I feel like that's the same, what happened to the people that were pissed off about horse and buggies? This is one of those changes that it's happening already. Like when Ford started rolling automobiles off the assembly line, the guy who makes wagon wheels probably, started a social media campaign and was really, really pissed off.
Yeah.
And he died very unhappy. I mean, it's done. So I don't see the point because again, like what we talked about in one of the other episodes, that MIDI and music was looked at the same way. I believe Photoshop was probably looked at the same way. In terms of it just makes it too damn easy, so it can't be good. That's just not a good argument, So is this to just appease them so that they can label it and go, oh, I don't watch stuff with AI. I don't. My opinion is that Tracy's right. Yes, you do.
Absolutely every
You
day.
just don't, you just aren't conscious of it. It's like saying, I don't watch movies that have CGI. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Unless all you watch is movies from the 1970s and 80s. Yes, you do.
Well,
Every
only
movie has CGI in it now.
even in
They're
the
using
80s,
it to
they were
clean
using.
stuff up, to fix things, to beautify it. It's there. They're
Well,
not using
even
AI, but they're using CGI. And CGI was looked at. I remember when CGI was really starting to pick up. Pixar kind of put it out there and raised everyone's awareness. And right around that time, it used to be that the only tool set you could use to make CGI was 3D Studio Max or Maya or these really expensive tools. And they would take supercomputers to be able to render in any. So it was just it was a barrier to entry. And then technology started to change, and Machinima, frankly, led the way in terms of possibilities of real time and what the benefits were of not having to wait on the engine.
Mm,
And the graphics card explosion happened, and Blender evolved into a platform, and then all these things evolved and stuff. And
mm,
at that time, there was a blog, it may still exist today, called Cartoon Brew.
mm. Yep.
And the primary audience of Cartoon Brew were traditional animators. And I'm talking about going all the way back to the early Disney movies where it was cells of animation. You were putting stuff together frame at a time, and it was this very manual, very physical process of animation. And you wouldn't believe how much the old school people who were involved with that, how much they poo-pooed computer animation. Not for the reason you'd think. Not originally it was, look how crappy that looks. Ha ha ha. Then Pixar came around and those people shut up. And then it's like, it's so low effort. It's just so low effort compared to doing it. But we did it the real way. I don't hear those people anymore now. They're not around. Nobody's listening to that.
I
And
just
I
feel
feel
like
like there's a danger of being caught in the same outmoded scenario when it comes to the AI art. And I'm not saying I love everything about it. I'm not changing my whole production plan to make things as easy as possible with AI art. I'm not. But I'm also not going to ignore it or act like it's going to go away just because I pout. It's here and it's eventually going to be part of our tool sets.
Mm,
You know, it's eventually going to be part of iClone. They haven't announced it as such, but it's inevitable. It will be used to generate props on the fly. It will be used to generate animations on the fly. The starters of this are already out there. It's already
yeah.
being worked on by NVIDIA and other companies. So it's going to be part of the process. But that doesn't make it easier for me to make an interesting film. It just makes it easier for me to throw shit onto the screen. But it doesn't, so I'm focusing on the part that will never be replaced by AI. And that's coming up with good ideas and then trying to execute them.
yeah.
And AI will never replace that as it just won't. The best it can ever do is synthesize. And it will probably become, I think I mentioned this, maybe if not on the show, then in some thread where we were all discussing this. But someone just said, this is going to replace Hollywood. AI is going to replace Hollywood. No, it's not. No, it's not. Did Beatlemania? Do you remember what Beatlemania was? Beatlemania was basically a impersonator band that sculpted themselves to kind of look like the Beatles and sound like the Beatles and same instrumentation. And they went touring all over the United States. They were hugely popular and they sounded a lot like the Beatles. They were the best Beatles cover band ever. And it was the Beatles from their prime,
Mhm.
all the way up through the late 60s. That era of Beatles, because people love hearing that and loved the idea of seeing it. And not nearly as many people as wanted to got to see the Beatles when they were around. That's the most AI will ever be, is the greatest Beatles cover band. But they will never be Lennon and McCartney. They will never be the Beatles. who actually created those friggin' amazing songs. They will never be, AI will never do that. The best it will be able to do is piece together pieces of other people's songs. And every once in a while, a broken clock's going to be right twice a day, right? Every once in a while, it's going to come up with something pretty neat, but it's all synthetic, So I don't know. I'm ranting.
Yes, I just looked up Cartoon Brew,
Yeah.
and they got a big thing celebrating 20 years of the website, and there's a lot of CGI cartoon news on it, and they're not talent species; they're just reporting, some there's a new Jurassic Park CGI animated thing. They're talking about it. Check out some of these upcoming things like that. So obviously their attitude has changed quite significantly
Yeah,
since
yeah,
those
and it's
early
been
days.
about 15 years since I even visited, so it doesn't surprise me because it's a losing battle, It's the
Yeah.
wagon wheel, it's the horse and buggy, and at the beginning of the automobile era.
Well, to add to your points there, Stability AI has introduced a 3D video generator, which is based on this stable diffusion model that it's developed, which generates orbital videos based on single image inputs. So that's you generating your 3D outputs.
Right, right.
That's already there. Um, Another tool that's just out this month, ConvAI, conversational agent, I guess, has announced a partnership with Unity to enable games to make non-player characters feel more immersive, and it's already teamed up with Second Life. And there's a really interesting bot demo, um, which I'll put a link to that you can have a look at. That's being created as a sort of the introductory tutorial. So it's a conversational agent that you can kind of chat to that's kind of rendered out as an avatar in real time. ConvAI, that you can presumably integrate into any virtual environment, I think. Runway has partnered with Music Match, which allows you creators to bring songs to life through dynamic video content generation, um, which is basically a lyrics to video tool. Um, Fairly astonishing, I think. Runway's also introduced this month a lip sync feature with generative audio, which is where you can kind of upload an image or a video, and it basically syncs the lips to the audio that you want to put through it.
Hmm.
It's actually only in early access to the creators program people at the moment, but it looks pretty neat from what I can see. There's Hume has got a demo of a voice to voice generative AI, which uses what it describes as an empathic voice interface with emotional intelligence, which apparently understands the tone of voice that you're using with it, through which it adds meaning to every word and uses vocal signals, I think, to guide its own language and speech. And according to the description of it, you can talk to it like a human and it will respond faster and more naturally than any other type of voice AI. So it's another type of conversational agent with emotion embedded into the audio design of it. That looks pretty amazing as well. Um, Actually, I was seeing a discussion on Facebook around that, and I was thinking, what on earth would you kind of use that for? But actually, I was thinking maybe what you could use it for is voice actor training. So, you kind of if you've hit the right tone, if what you get back from it is something that you wanted or intended to signify with your performance. But yeah, conversational agent sounds quite interesting, I think. Um, so that's it for me on news. I know it's a real shed load of stuff. I got other stuff that I was going to share, but I think that better be me done this month on the omnibus of stuff that we've got.
Well, I've got three pieces of news, which Phil's just moved on the.
Oh, sorry.
I had
I'm
to,
trying to get out in front of the links list that I need to edit this episode later, so I've been moving stuff as we talk about it. But it's
Uh,
uh, okay, I've got it. I've
you
got it
see
back
it
here.
now? Okay.
I was just looking at it, about to read it, and it disappeared off the side.
oh no.
Sorry
Okay,
about that.
all right. So first one, we had the Oscars a few weeks ago from when we recorded,
Mhm.
and the film that won the best visual effects was actually Godzilla Minus One. And I'm afraid I didn't get a chance to see this in the cinema, so I'm gonna have to wait for it for the home release. Now, um, there was a discussion about the budget for this film, which was $15 million. When you think about it, films like the Marvel films, which have
Yeah.
excessive budgets about 300 million, or even Dune Part 2 was 200 million, and yet this Godzilla film won. And I watched the trailer for it, and I can see why. It was very impressively well done. So to celebrate the win, the visual effects, the lead visual effects artist, he put the Godzilla 3D model out. He uploaded it free to download, and
Hmm.
it's opens. It's royalty free as well, so you can use it
Oh
um,
wow.
however you like. Um, I have downloaded it. It's a Blender file. I don't really have any plans for a Godzilla film, but I thought, well, you never know. And just a little bit of part of cinema history as well, because it's the first time Godzilla's won an Oscar, and I can't say I've opened it up in Blender or done anything with it. I don't know if I can import it into iClone. It may be a little bit too complicated, you know, as far as polygons and textures go for iClone, but I've got it there just in case. And I thought, it might be useful for people. So I wanted to bring it up. And it is a big achievement for the film. So I look forward to the home release so I can watch
Yeah.
the film and see why it won.
Can I ask
Uh,
you a quick question related to that, Damien? It's
yeah.
sort of on topic, sort of not, but have you had any luck bringing in non-humanoid characters into iClone and animating them? Like there's like, and let me, before you answer, so there's a process that you can bring in any humanoid character that has, two arms, two legs. You can bring them in through Character Creator using something called AccuRig. And even if that mesh has no skeletal structure at all,
Mm.
which is typically done when the model is built, right?
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't have it, if you can at least get it into a standard T pose, then you can accurately fill out the skeletal structure of that character, including finger bones and a variable number of fingers. So if it's some kind of sci-fi creature, it might have 3 fingers or 4 or well 5. Um, Getting the facial bones built out is a little bit more work, but it's doable, right? But that's all for humanoid characters. Like there's a film that I was working on recently, which basically it wasn't a bipedal humanoid form at all. It was a four-legged animal, basically. And there really isn't any easy path to do that. Um, and so unless the character has skeleton already there for like on a Godzilla, for example, you've got um, the arms and legs and head are all technically that could be treated as a bipedal figure, but with the tail is important, right? It can't just be curved and stuck all the time. So I was just curious, Damon, if you've ever imported like, so you're doing Star Wars stuff, so maybe like a Jabba the Hutt or someone like that that's not a traditional figure. What you've run into when you try and import those, get
Um,
them to be movable characters in iClone.
so I found a way to create a creature with the video game Spore and export the model into a format that can be imported into iClone.
Okay.
Um, I did it once because there's a creature in the Rebels cartoon series called a Loth Cat. It's a Star Wars cat, basically.
Okay.
I wanted to put one into Heir to the Empire as a joke, just in the background
Okay.
of an establishing shot. And the first thing I did was to look to see if anyone had created one that I could download and use, and they
Right,
had
like on
not.
Sketchfab or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there wasn't one. There might be now, but at the time when I was doing this scene, there wasn't one.
Right.
So uh, I hit about this idea of using Spore for it, and I was able to do it, but it already has the when it exports from Spore, because Spore generates the skeleton based on the way you design the creature. So if you design something with 8 legs or whatever, it knows how to. The game is smart enough to rig it automatically because
Right.
it has to be able
Right.
to move. So when you export it from the game, the skeleton comes with it. So I was able to import it. I don't remember the exact process I used for it because it was a while ago now. But the bones could be altered in iClone. Now the problem with it is
Through
there's
like the
no,
motion layer editor, is that what you're talking about? So
yeah,
like you could keyframe
yeah.
movements?
But the
Okay.
problem is the animations that Spore creates do not get exported. So the only way to do it to make it move was to keyframe it
Manual
manually,
keyframe. Okay.
which was a pain. So I didn't do it very often.
Yeah.
Uh,
For a cat in particular, I would think it would be to get the
yeah.
tail looking right, especially. Okay. Well, thank
That's
you. I
that's
didn't mean to
what
sidetrack you, but I was just when I saw
I
the Godzilla
I
model, I was curious about that. Yeah.
I know it can be done without bones, but I don't know because I've never tried it. But I've
Yeah,
seen
there's no way to
people.
add those bones in. Like if you just brought in just a mesh,
Yeah,
there's no way I know of to add bones for an unusual appendage like a long tail or giant ears or things like that. But yeah, I was curious about if basically if I'm looking for something like that, I need to look for a solution where the model already has skeletal structure in there
yeah.
and bring it in that way.
And
Okay. That's what I
Spore is a good
suspected. I just want to make sure.
Spore is a good way to do it. Although you have to keep in mind that the game is a decade and a half old, so it's not necessarily going to create the most detailed characters anymore. Like if
Right.
you, the problem with the cat was there's no fur on it, um, on the model that the game creates because the game couldn't create fur.
Of
So I had
course.
to do some texture effects on it to make it try and look a bit furry, and it helps to have it tiny in the background, so you don't really need that kind of detail. But
Sure.
if you wanted to have the cat right up close to the camera, you're going to see that it's not got any fur on it. But that is one way to create fantastical creatures that uh, don't necessarily need real basis in the
Okay.
world. So um, there was that. All right, so next piece of news. I was watching the Future Games video show the other day. It's one of those things where they show trailers for upcoming games and updates on them. And there's a game we've covered a few times before called Blockbuster Inc., which
Mm.
is a spiritual successor to the movies. So a trailer came on, and I thought, well, this come a long way since we last talked about it. And at the end, there was a release date, which is 6th of June. And
Wow.
yeah, so you can it's on Steam. And the trailer looks pretty interesting. They were recreating
Mm.
bits obviously from movies. Like there's a thing that's obviously Barbie and Ken from last year's Barbie movie, and made them look like the characters in it, sort of cartoony versions of it. Um, and I thought, well, I'm going to buy this when it comes out because I enjoyed the movies. I enjoyed the business management side of it because that's fun. But I also really enjoyed the movie making part of it, and I'm going to give this a go and just play around with it. Yeah, I don't think it would replicate what I do with iClone, but there's a bit of fun. Why not? Um, and when I was looking at that, I saw there's actually a demo, which there was a demo years ago, but there's now a more recent one. It's called Prologue.
Mm.
I've downloaded it and I meant to play it before this recording so I could talk about it, but I didn't get a chance to do that. So it'll be something I'll talk about next month, I think. Because I'm interested to see how it's evolved since that very early demo that
You know what?
was
I'll try to play it
released.
before next month's recordings as well, so we can discuss it. Yeah,
All right, that sounds good.
it looks interesting.
Yeah. And then the third piece of news, uh, obviously I went to see Dune Part 2. I've seen it twice in the cinema and loved it both times. And I've been devouring any interview I could find with Denis Villeneuve because I feel like there's a lot to learn from this guy as a filmmaker. And I came across one where he's being interviewed by Steven Spielberg. I believe it's one of those things that's a special screening of Dune Part 1. but he was there present, and they talked about the film before the screening took place. Um, and so Steven Spielberg is asking him all kinds of questions about the film. And the bit that I wanted to talk about was says when they're out filming in the desert, there are very limited times of day that they can actually film in because it gets too hot for the camera crew.
Oh, I
And
remember you
they
telling
have
me
to,
about this. Yeah.
yeah. So they can do it in the morning and they can do it in the evening. And they have to plan the lighting very carefully. So what they did for this one is it doesn't go into details, but what I pieced together was they 3D scanned the dunes they wanted to use, and then they imported those models into the Unreal Engine, which he very specifically said the Unreal Engine, so this is where the
Uh-huh.
machinima news comes in, so that they could simulate the lighting in real time and figure out the time of day that would best suit the scenes they wanted to create.
Mm.
And so they know, like, there's a scene where Paul and Johnny are sitting on a dune having this romantic scene. And they don't want to know, they had to film it multiple takes from behind and in front. So they had to know when was the best time to do the front scenes and when was the best time to do the back. And they could do that in Unreal, and it was able to save them a huge amount of time because they knew exactly when to be set up and how long they would have to do that particular shot. And if they need to do it again, they know to do it the next day at the same time, and then they could, while they were doing that, they could get set up for the next bit that's over there, where the lighting would be in the right place, and then they can immediately go over there and do it. But then it get too hot, so then they stop for the day. And I
Mm.
just thought that was a really interesting way to use Machinima and the Unreal Engine, because we've heard about previous, figuring out where characters have to be in all, action scenes and stuff like that. But I've never heard of one just figuring out where the sun's going to be before it gets too hot
Yeah.
in the day.
Yeah. Fascinating.
It's
Yeah.
wild.
So that's my news for this month.
Wow, what a packed show.
Yeah. Well, if you have any comments, you, our listening audience, have any comments on any of these stories or on the opinions that we've expressed, feel free to drop us a line as a comment on the show, wherever you see it posted, or via email, talk@completelymachinima.com. We love to hear your feedback and love to interact with it. And thank you for joining us. And on behalf of myself and Tracy and Damien, have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.